You think you can just change the rules without a vote?
This ends now.
We're done with your schemes, Carol.
The evidence is clear. We have to follow through.
Please, it's a mistake. Let's get this moved.
Finally, we're open for business.
Time to fix things up.
Cheers to that.
You need to leave right now before the deputies get here. Vanessa Whitmore said it loud enough for every contractor at the shoreline to hear. One manicured finger pointed straight at my chest, while Lake Wind pushed fog across the water behind her like smoke rolling over a battlefield. I'd barely stepped out of my truck when she blocked the gravel driveway with her white Lexus SUV and started filming me on her phone. "This property belongs to the HOA," she snapped. "And you are trespassing." The word echoed across the muddy shoreline, while 3 dock workers stopped unloading lumber to stare at me. Rain tapped against the metal roof of the old bait warehouse 50 yards behind us, slow and steady, and somewhere out on the lake a boat horn groaned through the fog. I looked past Vanessa toward the rusted chain gate hanging half-open beside the fishing dock my uncle had owned for 38 years. "Morning to you too," I said quietly. That only made her smile tighter. Vanessa Whitmore loved audiences. You could tell from the way she angled herself toward the crowd. Chin lifted, blazer perfectly dry despite the drizzle coming sideways off the water. She wasn't angry yet. Angry would come later. Right then she was enjoying herself. "You people see this?" she called toward the contractors. "This is exactly what happens when outsiders think county land is up for grabs." One of the younger guys shifted awkwardly beside a pallet of wet cedar planks. Another avoided eye contact completely. Nobody wanted to get trapped between a property fight and a woman who practically ran Blackwater Cove Estates like her own little courthouse. I grabbed my coffee thermos from the truck seat and shut the door calmly while thunder rolled somewhere deep beyond the lake. Cold morning air carried the smell of diesel fuel, wet cedar, and muddy water up from the shoreline. "Vanessa," I said, "you should probably stop recording for a second and think about what you're doing." That made her laugh. Not nervous laughter either. Confident laughter. HOA board meeting laughter. "Oh, I already know exactly what I'm doing." Then she raised her phone higher and dialed 911 right in front of me. The contractors exchanged looks immediately. One climbed down from the dock, like he suddenly regretted being there at all. "Yes," Vanessa said sweetly into the phone, pacing dramatically across the gravel. "I need deputies at the old Holloway parcel right away. There's a man trespassing on restricted HOA property and threatening workers." That part made 2 guys look up fast because everybody standing there knew I hadn't threatened anybody. But social pressure works funny in small lake communities. Nobody wants to become the next target. Rain started falling harder against the warehouse roof behind us while fog thickened over the waterline. Vanessa ended the call, folded her arms, and gave me that polished little smile people use when they think they've already won. "You should have stayed gone, Grant," she said softly enough that only I could hear it. "Your uncle made this difficult for years too." That was the first moment something inside me shifted because my uncle had only been dead 92 days, and suddenly this wasn't feeling like confusion anymore. It was starting to feel coordinated. Before I could answer, headlights appeared through the fog at the top of the gravel road, and the second Vanessa saw the county cruiser pulling in, her smile widened like Christmas morning. The cruiser tires crunched slowly over the wet gravel driveway before stopping beside Vanessa's Lexus, red and blue lights washing across the fog rolling off Blackwater Lake. Deputy Martin Pike stepped out first, broad shoulders under a brown rain jacket, one hand resting near his belt while cold drizzle tapped against the hood of his cruiser. Another deputy stayed inside watching the shoreline through the windshield. Nobody spoke for a second. All you could hear was rain hitting metal roofs down by the bait warehouse and dock ropes knocking softly against old wooden pilings. Vanessa moved fast to fill the silence. "Deputy, thank God," she said, lowering her voice into something polished and concerned. "This man has been harassing workers and attempting to access restricted HOA property after repeated warnings." The way she said restricted made it sound official, practiced, like she had used that exact sentence before. Pike glanced at me. "Sir." I handed him my driver's license calmly. "Grant Holloway." Vanessa folded her arms immediately. "He does not belong here." I noticed 2 residents standing farther up the hill near a black pickup truck pretending not to watch. One of them quietly lifted his phone and started recording. Small towns spread stories faster than storms. Pike looked past us toward the old warehouse sitting dark beside the lake. You got documentation proving ownership? Vanessa answered before I could. He will not. That confidence caught my attention more than the accusation itself. She was too certain. I unscrewed my coffee thermos slowly while lake wind pushed cold mist across the shoreline and handed Pike a folded packet from inside my truck. Not deeds. Not legal threats. Just county tax receipts with the parcel number printed clearly across the top. Pike's expression changed almost immediately. Very slight, but enough. Vanessa saw it too. That cannot be correct, she snapped. The association maintains this entire shoreline. Pike ignored her and read the parcel number again. You said Holloway? He asked me quietly. My uncle was Raymond Holloway. That name landed harder than I expected. One of the dock workers looked down instantly. Another muttered something under his breath. Vanessa's jaw tightened for the first time all morning. My uncle had lived out here almost 40 years running bait deliveries, boat storage, and dock repair before his health failed last winter. Everybody around Blackwater Cove knew him, or at least they used to. Pike looked back toward Vanessa carefully now. Ma'am, when did the HOA acquire this parcel? Silence. Just thunder rolling low across the lake and rain ticking against aluminum roofing. Vanessa recovered quickly. The community has used this land for years, she said. Everyone understands it belongs to the association. Used, not owned. Big difference. Pike noticed it too. His tone cooled several degrees. That is not what I asked. Up near the road, another resident had stopped beside the mailbox cluster with an umbrella, openly watching now. Vanessa suddenly looked aware of the audience for the first time. Deputy, she said carefully. I think we should continue this privately. That was new. 5 minutes earlier, she wanted a public performance. Pike handed my papers back. Nobody is being removed from property this morning until county records are clarified. The fog seemed to press tighter over the water after he said that. Vanessa stared at me with the kind of smile people use when they are trying not to panic in public. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice enough that only I could hear. Your uncle was supposed to settle this before he died. For a second, I forgot about the rain completely. I just looked at her standing there beside the muddy shoreline in her spotless boots, while memories hit me all at once. My uncle sitting alone in that diner off Route 16 last February. The exhaustion in his voice during our last phone call. The way he kept saying the people from the subdivision would not leave him alone. At the time, I thought he meant complaints. Now I was starting to realize he meant pressure. Deputy Pike stayed another 10 minutes before the cruisers finally pulled away through the fog, tires hissing over rain-soaked gravel, while everybody on the shoreline pretended to go back to work. Nobody actually did. The second law enforcement leaves a small lake community, the real trial starts. You can feel it in the silence. Contractors avoiding eye contact. Residents lingering too long by their mailboxes. Pickup trucks slowing down near the property entrance just enough to look without looking. Vanessa stood beside her Lexus with both arms folded tight against the cold morning air while thunder rolled deeper across the water. Her confidence had not disappeared yet, but it had changed shape. Sharper now. Meaner. This is not over, she said quietly as I walked toward the old warehouse. No, I answered. I do not think it is. The smell hit me the second I unlocked the side door. Wet cedar, lake mildew, old engine oil, decades of fishing equipment soaked into warped wooden walls. Rain hammered softly against the metal roof overhead, while fog drifted past broken window panes facing the dock. My uncle used to keep a propane heater near the back workbench beside a coffee maker older than I was. It was still there, half-empty thermos beside it. Reading glasses folded neatly on a ledger book like he had just stepped outside for a minute instead of dying alone in county hospice 3 towns over. That part hit harder than I expected. I stood there longer than I should have staring at the glasses while lake wind rattled loose metal siding outside. Then I noticed something strange. The ledger book was gone. Not missing entirely. Torn out. Cleanly. Several pages ripped from the center. My stomach tightened immediately. Raymond Holloway documented everything. Boat rentals, dock repairs, fuel deliveries, arguments, especially arguments. I moved toward the filing cabinet beside the workbench and found it half unlocked. Inside sat old shoreline permits, utility maps, handwritten invoices, and 3 certified letters from Blackwater Cove Estates demanding voluntary shoreline transition negotiations. Negotiations. That word sat wrong in my head. HOA associations do not negotiate for land they already own. Rainwater dripped steadily through a leak near the rear office while I opened the newest envelope. Final notice regarding cooperative property integration. Signed personally by Vanessa Whitmore 6 weeks before my uncle died. There was no purchase amount listed anywhere. No legal filing. Just pressure disguised as professionalism. The kind that wears blazers and smiles while trying to outlast old men. Outside, tires crunched suddenly across gravel. Voices followed. Female voices. I stepped near the window carefully and saw 3 residents standing near the shoreline fence talking with Vanessa under umbrellas. One woman glanced nervously toward the warehouse while another crossed her arms hard against the cold. Vanessa kept speaking in that polished HOA tone people use when they want gossip to sound responsible. Unsafe conditions, county concerns, possible seizure complications. I could not hear every word through the rain, but I did not need to. She was already building a public narrative. By noon, the entire subdivision would believe I was some outsider trying to steal disputed land from the community. What surprised me was how fast the pressure spread. My phone buzzed twice before I even left the warehouse. Unknown numbers. One voicemail. You should probably leave this alone, friend. Calm male voice. Older. Not threatening exactly. Worse than threatening. Comfortable. Like whoever called assumed people usually listen to him. I replayed it once while staring out across the muddy shoreline where fog drifted low over the dock posts. Then another message came through from a contractor I had hired 2 days earlier. Sorry, Mr. Holloway. We are pulling out until ownership gets resolved. Insurance concerns. I leaned against the old workbench and closed my eyes for a second while thunder rolled again over Blackwater Lake. That was the moment the situation stopped feeling like harassment and started feeling organized. By sunset, the rumors had already outrun the rain. I stopped at Miller's Diner off Route 16 because I needed coffee stronger than the stale thermos sitting back at the warehouse. And the second I walked through the door, the whole place went quiet in that small-town way where silverware still moves, but nobody looks directly at you. Rainwater dripped from my jacket onto black and white tile, while country music hummed low from an old speaker near the pie case. 3 men sitting near the window glanced away too fast when they saw me. One of them was wearing a Blackwater Cove maintenance hoodie. Another had probably worked fishing tournaments with my uncle 20 years ago. Nobody waved. That told me everything. Vanessa had been busy. I slid into a booth near the fogged-up front glass while headlights smeared across the wet highway outside. Doris, the waitress, poured coffee without asking. You doing okay, Grant? She asked quietly. Not casual concern either. Careful concern. Like she was testing whether talking to me publicly might become a problem later. Depends who is asking, I said. That got the faintest smile out of her before she leaned closer. People are saying the county may condemn the shoreline property over environmental issues. I looked up slowly. Who told them that? Doris glanced toward the counter where 2 women were whispering over pie plates. Vanessa. Of course it was Vanessa. Environmental issues. Unsafe structures. Ownership dispute. Every rumor designed to sound responsible enough that people would repeat it without questioning where it started. I sat there listening to rain hammer the diner windows while anger finally started settling into something colder and more focused. Not outrage anymore. Pattern recognition. My uncle had not been overwhelmed by random HOA complaints. He had been isolated piece by piece until surrender probably felt easier than fighting. The realization sat heavy in my chest. Doris slid a folded receipt toward me while pretending to wipe the table. Guy came in earlier asking whether you still had your uncle's storage keys, she whispered. Said he worked for the association. That hit me instantly. Somebody thought there was something valuable inside the warehouse before I found it first. I left cash under the coffee mug and drove straight toward the county annex through cold rain and thickening fog. The courthouse sat dark against the lakefront hill except for one office light glowing on the 2nd floor. County buildings always smell the same after hours. Dust, old paper, wet boots, burnt coffee left on warmers too long. Deputy Pike was standing near the clerk counter talking quietly with an older woman when he noticed me walking in. His expression tightened immediately. You picked a rough day to become popular around here, he muttered. I stepped closer to the counter. I need to know whether somebody filed environmental complaints against the Holloway parcel. The older clerk looked uncomfortable before opening a thin folder beside her keyboard. 3 complaints this year, she admitted softly. All anonymous. Anonymous. But not really. Pike rubbed his jaw and lowered his voice. Grant, off the record? Somebody has been pushing hard to get county pressure on that property for months. Thunder rattled the courthouse windows hard enough to make the fluorescent lights flicker. Then the clerk pulled one more document from the folder and paused. This one is strange, though. She slid the paper halfway toward me. Community Shoreline Integration Proposal. Submitted 8 days before my uncle died. Applicant listed as Blackwater Cove Estates Association. Proposed future use. Expanded resident marina access. My stomach turned cold. They were not trying to remove my uncle from the property. They were trying to absorb it before probate finished. The rain finally broke sometime after midnight, but the fog stayed heavy over Blackwater Lake like the whole shoreline was holding its breath. I sat alone inside the warehouse office with the old desk lamp glowing over my uncle's paperwork while water dripped steadily from the gutters outside. My phone had not stopped buzzing for 3 hours. Unknown numbers. Residents asking cautious questions. One message accusing me of trying to destroy community access to the lake. Another warning me that people around here protect their own. Vanessa had managed to turn uncertainty into suspicion almost overnight. That took practice. I leaned back in the creaking office chair and stared at the marina proposal again while thunder rolled low across the water. 8 days before Raymond Holloway died, the association tried to absorb the property into their development plan. Not purchase it. Absorb it. That wording mattered. It implied expectation. Confidence. Like somebody already believed the outcome had been arranged. Then I noticed a handwritten notation clipped behind the proposal packet. Delay probate review pending environmental clarification. No signature. No department stamp. Just typed initials at the bottom. I felt something cold settle into my stomach. Somebody inside county administration had slowed the transfer process intentionally. Before I could think further, headlights swept across the warehouse windows. A dark pickup truck rolled slowly into the gravel lot and stopped near the dock. Engine stayed running. I stepped outside into cold lake wind carrying the smell of wet cedar and muddy shoreline. The man climbing out looked mid-60s, broad frame, gray Carhartt jacket, soaked dark from drizzle. "You Grant Holloway?" he asked. "Depends who is asking." He nodded once toward the warehouse. "Name is Walter Pierce. Used to manage maintenance contracts for Blackwater Cove before Vanessa pushed me out 2 years ago." He looked exhausted. The kind of tired that sits behind the eyes permanently. "Your uncle knew they were coming after this property." I said nothing. Walter reached into the truck and handed me a weatherproof folder. "Raymond made copies. Told me if anything happened to him, I should wait until somebody from the family showed up." Rain ticked softly against the truck hood while fog drifted across the fishing dock behind us. Inside the folder sat internal HOA emails, board discussions, budget projections, marina expansion sketches using my uncle's shoreline parcel as future resident access. One message from Vanessa stopped me cold. "Raymond Holloway is isolated and financially exhausted. Continued pressure will likely force voluntary transfer by summer." I read that sentence twice while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the lake. Walter rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "She convinced the board your uncle was dangerous for property values. Said his docs were outdated. Said environmental inspectors were already looking at the place." "Were they?" I asked quietly. Walter shook his head. "No. But after enough rumors, people stop caring whether something is true." That line stayed with me. Because he was right. In communities like Blackwater Cove, reputation becomes evidence if repeated often enough. Then Walter hesitated before speaking again. "There is one more thing you need to know." His voice lowered. "Vanessa is not doing this for the association anymore." Lake wind pushed harder through the marina slips while rainwater rippled across the dark shoreline. "What does that mean?" I asked. Walter looked back toward the subdivision lights glowing through fog up on the ridge. "Developers from Nashville have been meeting with her privately for months. Luxury condos. Expanded marina. New restaurants. Your shoreline parcel is the missing piece." For the first time since this started, I stopped thinking like a grieving nephew protecting family property. I started thinking like a man standing in the way of a multi-million-dollar development deal. The fog over Blackwater Lake turned silver just before sunrise, low and heavy against the marina slips while cold wind rattled the loose chains along the fishing dock. I barely slept. Every time thunder rolled across the water, I kept hearing that sentence from Vanessa's email in my head. financially exhausted, likely forced voluntary transfer. Like my uncle had not been a person at all, just a delay in somebody's development schedule. By morning, the anger had hardened into something cleaner, more useful. I stopped thinking about defending myself and started thinking about exposure. People like Vanessa survive because nobody wants paperwork fights in public. But paperwork becomes dangerous once insurance companies, county liability departments, and developers start realizing their names might end up attached to fraud allegations. I spread every document Walter gave me across the warehouse workbench beside the old propane heater while rain drummed softly against the metal roof overhead. Internal HOA projections, shoreline expansion plans, private emails discussing probable transfer timelines. Then I found the mistake. Buried halfway through a contractor estimate was a preliminary marina redesign map dated 4 months earlier, 4 months before my uncle died. And right across the center of the map sat proposed fuel dock locations extending directly onto property still legally titled to Raymond Holloway. Not future acquisition space, existing operational footprint. My pulse slowed immediately. That changed everything. It meant developers had already been sold access rights nobody legally possessed yet. Outside, tires crunched across the gravel lot again. This time it was Deputy Pike carrying 2 coffees through the drizzle. "Heard you made some friends overnight," he muttered while stepping inside. I handed him the marina blueprint silently. Pike studied it for a long moment beneath the buzzing warehouse light. Jesus. That was my reaction too. Rainwater rolled down the fogged windows behind him while he flipped through the attached contractor pages. "If this design proposal got circulated before probate cleared," he said carefully, "somebody may have represented ownership they did not actually have." There it was. Not trespassing accusations anymore. Liability exposure. Fraud exposure. Institutional embarrassment. Entirely different battlefield now. Pike looked at me differently after that. Not like a guy tangled in neighborhood drama. Like someone standing in the middle of a county-level mess nobody wanted public. "You planning to file this?" he asked. I stared toward the lake through the warped warehouse glass, where fog drifted over the muddy shoreline. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because people tell the truth faster when they think they still have time to hide things." Pike actually smiled at that. Small smile. Tired smile. "Your uncle said almost the exact same thing once." That hit harder than expected. For a second, the warehouse felt painfully quiet except for rain ticking against sheet metal and distant boat cables knocking together in the wind. Then my phone buzzed again. Another community alert from the Blackwater Cove residence page. Vanessa had posted a statement overnight. Ongoing county concerns regarding unsafe commercial shoreline operations. Residents advised to avoid lower marina access roads until further notice. Comments underneath were already spiraling. People blaming me for property value concerns. Others asking why the association was discussing private land at all. One comment stopped me cold. "My husband helped survey that parcel in 1998. The HOA never owned it." Posted by Linda Mercer. Then another resident replied publicly. "Wait, if that is true, why did Vanessa call law enforcement for trespassing?" Pike leaned over my shoulder reading the screen while thunder rolled low beyond the lake. "Looks like the crowd is starting to catch up," he murmured. For the first time since arriving at Blackwater Cove, I realized Vanessa was losing control of the narrative. By late afternoon, the rain finally eased into a cold mist hanging low over Blackwater Lake, but the pressure around Blackwater Cove felt heavier than ever. You could see it in the way residents gathered in little clusters near the mailbox station at the subdivision entrance, talking quietly until somebody noticed another person listening. Rumors had stopped moving in one direction now. They were bouncing back. Questions were replacing assumptions. I drove slowly past the clubhouse and noticed something I had not seen once since arriving there. Vanessa Whitmore, standing alone. Usually she moved through that neighborhood like a politician during campaign season, smiling, directing conversations, controlling the emotional temperature of every room she entered. Not today. Today people kept drifting away from her after 30 seconds or less. One couple walked off mid-conversation while she was still speaking. Another resident avoided eye contact entirely and pretended to answer a phone call. Social power does not disappear all at once. It leaks out slowly through silence. I parked near the fishing dock and stepped out into sharp lake wind carrying the smell of wet cedar and cold mud from the shoreline. Fog drifted low across the marina pilings while thunder rumbled far out beyond the ridge. Vanessa spotted me immediately from across the gravel lot beside the clubhouse. Her posture straightened on instinct. Performance mode. Grant, she called with that polished HOA voice, louder than necessary so nearby residents could hear. I think it would be wise for both sides to lower the temperature here. Both sides. Interesting phrase from the woman who called deputies on me 48 hours earlier. I walked closer calmly, while several residents pretended not to watch from under the clubhouse awning. You mean after telling people I was threatening the community? I asked. Her smile tightened. People are concerned about instability. No, I said quietly. People are concerned about liability. That landed. I saw it immediately in her eyes. Tiny hesitation. Tiny crack. Behind her, one of the board members shifted awkwardly near the entrance doors and looked away. Vanessa lowered her voice. You are making this uglier than it needs to be. I did not submit development plans for property I did not own. Silence. Real silence this time. Even the people under the awning stopped pretending not to listen. Rainwater dripped steadily from the clubhouse gutters while wind pushed fog across the parking lot. Vanessa looked around and realized too late that the audience had changed sides emotionally. Nobody was nodding along with her anymore. Nobody was rushing to defend her. Then the clubhouse doors opened and Linda Mercer stepped outside, holding a stack of old survey copies in both hands. Vanessa, she said carefully, my husband confirmed the shoreline parcel was always separate from HOA property. More residents turned toward them immediately. Somebody near the mailboxes whispered, Jesus Christ. Vanessa laughed once, short and brittle. Linda, with respect, your husband retired 15 years ago. Linda did not back down, and he still remembers the truth. That was the moment Vanessa lost the room. Not dramatically. Worse than dramatically. Quietly. Residents started looking at each other instead of at her. Board members stopped standing close to her. One woman folded her arms and muttered, You told us county ownership was confirmed. Another asked, Did you call the police on him knowing this was private property? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then forced another smile that looked painfully rehearsed now. Fog rolled across the muddy shoreline behind us while thunder echoed over the lake again. And for the first time since this started, Vanessa Whitmore looked less like the woman controlling Blackwater Cove and more like someone realizing the crowd had finally stopped believing her. The emergency HOA meeting started at 7 o'clock sharp under fluorescent lights that buzzed softly above the Blackwater Cove clubhouse like trapped insects. Outside, rain hammered the parking lot hard enough to blur the lake beyond the windows into gray static, while thunder rolled across the water every few minutes. Pickup trucks lined both sides of the gravel overflow area now. More residents than I had seen all week stood packed inside the clubhouse shoulder to shoulder, damp jackets steaming in the heat, voices low and uneasy. Nobody was laughing anymore. The atmosphere felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like people waiting outside a courtroom before a verdict. Vanessa stood at the front beside the board table in another cream-colored blazer, papers stacked perfectly in front of her, but the polish was cracking now. You could hear it in her voice. Too fast. Too rehearsed. There has been significant misinformation circulating regarding the shoreline parcel, she announced carefully. The board remains committed to protecting community interests. Nobody clapped. Nobody nodded. One board member stared at the table the entire time. Another kept checking his phone nervously. Then Linda Mercer stood up from the second row holding old survey copies against her chest. Did you or did you not tell residents that county ownership was confirmed? She asked. Silence hit the room instantly. Rain pounded against the clubhouse roof while fog pressed thick against the windows facing the marina. Vanessa smiled tightly. Linda, property matters can become legally complicated. That is not what I asked. More voices started quietly now. Questions overlapping. Why were deputies called? Who approved marina plans? Were developers already involved? The pressure was shifting too fast for Vanessa to control. I stayed near the back wall beside the coffee station saying nothing while people turned on each other emotionally in real time. That was the thing about communities built on appearances. Once trust cracks, everybody starts remembering things they ignored before. Then the clubhouse doors opened. The room went dead quiet immediately. Sheriff Daniel Reeves walked in beside two county investigators wearing dark rain jackets, stamped Property Compliance Division across the back. Water dripped from their boots onto the tile floor, while thunder rattled the windows behind them. Vanessa visibly froze. Not dramatically, just enough. Sheriff Reeves removed his hat slowly and looked toward the board table. "Evening, folks." Nobody answered. One investigator stepped forward carrying a thick folder. "We are here regarding multiple complaints involving false property representations, unauthorized development proposals, and possible liability exposure connected to the Holloway shoreline parcel." The room exploded into whispers instantly. Vanessa stood abruptly. "This is completely inappropriate during an active board session." The investigator did not even look at her. "Mrs. Whitmore, your association submitted preliminary marina expansion documents referencing property access rights that county records do not support." Another board member actually pushed his chair backward away from her at that sentence. Small movement, huge message. Vanessa looked around the room, finally understanding nobody wanted proximity anymore. Not legally, not socially. Sheriff Reeves glanced toward me near the back wall. "Mr. Holloway has cooperated fully." That changed the emotional temperature of the room completely. Suddenly people stopped looking at me like the problem and started looking at Vanessa like the risk. One resident muttered, "You told us this was settled already." Another said louder, "Did you use HOA money for those developer meetings?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out immediately. For the first time since I met her, she looked genuinely alone. Rain hammered the clubhouse roof harder while fog swallowed the marina lights outside. And standing there under those fluorescent lights with county investigators flipping through evidence beside her, Vanessa Whitmore finally looked like a woman realizing authority only works until real authority walks into the room. The fallout started before the meeting even ended. By the time Sheriff Reeves and the county investigators walked out into the rain carrying those folders, 3 HOA board members had already resigned publicly in front of the room. Nobody even tried to stop them. The atmosphere inside the clubhouse felt hollow now, like a building after a storm warning when everybody realizes the damage already happened. Vanessa stayed frozen beside the board table while residents gathered into whispering circles around her instead of with her. That difference mattered. People no longer looked at her for answers. They looked at her like a liability. Rain hammered the windows while fog swallowed the marina lights outside, and for a long moment nobody spoke at all. Then one older resident near the coffee station finally broke the silence. "You called deputies on that man knowing the land was not yours." Vanessa tried one last time to regain control. "I acted in the community's best interest." Her voice cracked slightly on the word community. Small crack. Huge moment. Another resident answered immediately. "No, you acted in yours." That was it. The final shift. You could feel it move through the room, like pressure releasing from a pipe. Nobody defended her after that. Not the board. Not the residents. Not even the people who used to orbit around her at every meeting pretending HOA politics mattered more than actual neighbors. Sheriff Reeves quietly informed the remaining board members that county review of all shoreline development activity would continue pending legal clarification and insurance liability assessment. The second he mentioned insurance exposure, panic spread visibly across the room. People stopped thinking emotionally and started thinking financially. Condos, marina expansions, property values, lawsuits. Suddenly Vanessa Whitmore looked less like a neighborhood authority figure and more like the person who almost dragged the entire community into a legal disaster. I stepped outside while the meeting collapsed behind me. Cold lake wind hit my face immediately, carrying the smell of wet cedar, diesel from dock equipment, and rain-soaked earth from the muddy shoreline below the clubhouse hill. For the first time since arriving at Blackwater Cove, I could breathe without feeling pressure sitting on my chest. Down by the marina, fog drifted low across the water while workers hired by the county removed temporary HOA barriers from the shoreline access road under portable floodlights. One of the contractors looked up when he saw me. "Mr. Holloway," he called. "Road is officially reopened." Simple sentence. But hearing it felt heavier than any courtroom victory probably could have. I drove slowly down the gravel road toward the warehouse with rain ticking softly against the truck windshield while thunder faded farther into the mountains. The old bait building stood quiet beside the lake under pale security lights, metal roof shining wet in the darkness. My uncle's dock. My uncle's shoreline. Still here. Still ours. I unlocked the warehouse and stepped inside where the smell of old cedar and machine oil wrapped around me like memory itself. The workbench lamp still glowed warm against the back wall beside Raymond's reading glasses. I picked them up carefully, and for the first time in days the anger finally loosened enough for grief to settle properly underneath it. Not just grief for losing him. Grief for how isolated they tried to make him before he died. But they failed. That mattered too. Over the next 3 weeks, the entire story unraveled publicly. County investigators confirmed the HOA never possessed legal rights to the shoreline parcel. The marina development proposal collapsed immediately once Nashville investors realized the land access had never been secured legally. Insurance carriers began reviewing possible liability exposure connected to false representations submitted during preliminary development planning. 2 additional board members resigned. Vanessa Whitmore stepped down for personal reasons 3 days later, though by then nobody believed her carefully polished statements anymore. Residents who avoided eye contact with me earlier in the week suddenly stopped by the dock bringing coffee, asking questions about Raymond, apologizing quietly for not speaking up sooner. Linda Mercer even helped organize a shoreline cleanup weekend to repair damage from the abandoned construction staging. Funny how fast communities rediscover morality once fear loses its spokesperson. The biggest irony came a month later during the county review hearing when officials confirmed the reopened Shoreline Road actually increased public emergency access safety for the lake area, meaning the barriers Vanessa installed had created more liability, not less. She spent months claiming she protected the neighborhood only to become the reason the county investigated the neighborhood in the first place. That kind of justice feels slow while you are living through it, but when it finally lands, it lands heavy. Looking back now, the real lesson was never about property lines or HOA politics. It was about what happens when people mistake confidence for truth long enough that nobody questions power anymore. Raymond Holloway spent years getting pushed into silence because everybody assumed the loudest person in the room must know what she was talking about. But paper trails do not care about personalities. Neither do county maps. Neither does the truth. Last weekend, I reopened the old dock for fishing rentals again, just like my uncle used to run them. Early morning fog rolled low over Blackwater Lake, while coffee steamed from my thermos and boat ropes knocked softly against wooden pilings in the cold air. Residents waved from passing pickup trucks. A couple kids fished off the shoreline near the reopened gate. The whole place felt quieter now. Cleaner somehow. Not perfect, but honest again. And every time I walk past that old warehouse workbench and see Raymond's glasses sitting there beside the ledger books they tried to erase, I remember something important. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply refusing to disappear long enough for the truth to catch up with the lie. If you made it this far, rank the story from 10 to 0. I would love to know what you think.